A controversial art exhibition was closed on its opening night this week after protesters called it racist. The show, Exhibit B, was being staged by London's Barbican Arts Centre and included some black performers who were depicted as slaves in chains and iron masks. Well, the protesters say it's an outrageous act of complicit racism. The Barbican says it's an important and challenging work of art.
This is degradation. If they want to challenge racism for real, stop subjecting us to this nightmare ordeal.
These were the scenes in London earlier this week as protesters disrupted the opening night of a new exhibition by South African artist Brett Bailey.
So you can relax for a few moments, just you know your position. Even when people are coming back this way, they will look at you. If there's nobody here, follow them always.
This is Exhibit B when it was shown in Edinburgh earlier this year. It draws on the so-called human zoos of the 19th century, where slaves were displayed as curiosities. The artist says his work forces us to confront racism then and now.
What was behind human zoos was the representation of the other in a particular way, to dehumanize and objectify them. I take colonial history, I take the atrocities that were committed under colonialism, right from the beginning of the 19th century all the way up until liberation in the 1950s, 1960s, and then I look at the residues of racism, or the racism we're still living with today.
But those opposed to the work say it's complicit in the racism it's meant to be challenging.
It's actually quite rude in 2014 that an institute like the Barbican thinks that putting black people in cages is challenging art and it's important work for London. I keep saying to them, who is it important for? This is the art of offence.
The exhibition was cancelled after safety concerns. The Barbican says the piece should still be shown and it's disturbed at the potential implications for freedom of expression. So, should this artwork be banned, or is anti-racism just being taken too far? We're joined now by Stella Odunlami, and Stella was part of the exhibition, also the director and founder of the Institute for Ideas think tank and free speech campaigner Claire Fox, and Lee Jasper, who was part of the protest outside the theatre, and Susan's still with us. So welcome to you all. Lee, first, why censor art?
Well, we didn't censor it. We haven't called for a change in the law so that it's banned. We exercised our democratic right.
And stopped it being shown?
Well, we exercised our democratic right to oppose what we thought was an offensive artwork that would reinforce racism rather than undermine it.
Why do you think that?
Well, we think that this show is no Anne Frank exhibition. It's not supported by an extensive learning programme in schools such as Anne Frank. It's not been part of an ongoing dialogue between the artist or the Barbican as an institution with London's black communities who've been here, you know, for nearly 2,000 years. We've got long-stayed organisations and institutions with whom they could have had a dialogue, as was the case around the Anne Frank exhibition. And so we feel that there was a lack of responsibility on behalf of the Barbican in its failure to consult with communities with whom it was intending to put on an artwork for whom we were supposed to be the beneficiaries. And we think the artist was misconceived in his responsibility in failing to ensure that he had that dialogue with London's black communities.
OK, so it's about dialogue, but also the protesters were saying outside that they found the work degrading. Stella, as part of the work, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that the piece was not necessarily made just for a black community. It was made for community in London at large, people who like to engage with art. Your point about the Anne Frank Museum, that's a museum that's there. It's permanent exhibition. This was a show that was brought in. It was touring the world for 5 days.
So does Anne Frank.
Just let Stella finish on this.
The show was conceived with the idea of, I guess, shining a light on the history of colonialism, how damaging it was, the atrocities that Europe has been built on, and I guess even more importantly, demonstrating how the legacy of that still haunts us today. Me and my fellow performers are all rather educated black artists who made the choice to take part in the piece as we thought it was a powerful piece and that it needed to be seen.
Stella, what role did you play?
I was found object number 2, which was the role of a modern-day asylum seeker from Nigeria.
OK. And do you think that was offensive? I mean, some of them, you had performers who were wearing masks. which obviously look quite shocking. But
the images
what about your role?
Are accurate. I didn't have any masks on. I was dressed in modern day clothing, and had a number pinned to my dress.
What's offensive about that, Lee?
Well, I think the thing is you see the artwork in its whole context. And it starts, you know, it shows a series of tableaus with black people in various degrees of restraint, objectification or oppression. And we say that our story is much more than that. We say that part of the narrative that is being displayed here, which is about revisiting these ideas in colonialism and historical oppression, miss the key agency of that oppression, which is the white people who, had they been included in this tableau, it would have made more sense.
So include white people. If it had been a white director, can I just ask you, if it had been a black director rather than a white director, would that have been more acceptable?
I've closed down a black show. I closed down a Jamaican theatre.
So you make a habit of closing down shows?
It was called Slave Babies. And we found it completely objectionable.
Yeah, you didn't see the show, did you?
You
didn't see the show,
well,
though,
hold
did
on,
you?
I didn't
Did you actually see the show?
Can I finish the
Yes,
point?
of course. And then we'll ask you whether you saw the show.
Tried to make a point.
OK.
Right? We closed down a Jamaican theatre company production, which was around Slave Babies. It was supposed to be a comedy. And we mobilised the black community in the late 90s, and we said, this is not a subject.
And had you seen the show?
What, Slave Babies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had seen the show?
No, he hadn't
No,
seen...
Slave Babies.
And you haven't seen your show?
No.
Well, the thing about Exhibit B is that it's the most covered artistic exhibition, the most written about artistic exhibition.
So you didn't feel you needed to?
I didn't feel I needed to
Claire?
I think it's a reasonable point that Stella makes, though, that to boast about the ability to close down art shows as a badge of honour is the scary bit of this discussion. The argument, or even the question, you know, so is that offensive? If we are going to close down art shows on the basis that they're offensive, we're going to censor anything that's offensive, then we actually are inviting in a kind of authoritarian, illiberal society that we live in. And one of the things that's most distasteful and awful about this whole discussion is that actually it's done, it seems to me, anti-racism a huge disservice. It associates anti-racism with not being able to tolerate or cope with, even, arguments it doesn't like. It actually is the idea that, you know, I would like to be able to go and see this artwork, which, by the way, and I've read a number of the reviews, I might not enjoy as an artwork. I might want to critique it as an artwork. Of course, there's pieces of theatre that I think are not very good theatre. There are pieces of art that I don't like, but that's the basis on which they should be judged. Art, not politics. And if you actually go around and say that there is a group of people, you said democratic right to protest.
That's a white privilege.
You should have, white privilege.
It's white privilege. It's white privilege.
Lee.
At the end of the day,
Lee,
black
I would suggest that you are insulting many black people who are for free speech and artistic freedom. And I'm not entirely sure who elected you to represent the views of all black people.
All right, before you do...
I don't think that the petition gives you the right to close down and censor.
Susan wants to come in with a point.
Before this gets too personal, and actually too narrowed down, dare I say it, to issues of racism, I think there's a broader issue here and a certain confusion. We can band around words like freedom, but freedom from always is constrained by freedom too. And just because you might have a right to say something, say, and I'm of Jewish extraction, by the way, I wanted to suddenly promote the glory of the swastika, many people would find that offensive. And even if I wanted to, that would constrain my doing it. So what I think...
Offending people is bigger then?
Well, one should. If
than the
one's
freedom
an artist,
of expression?
No, they're both. If you're an artist, rather than having to have recourse to being policed by an external source. I remember the old days of Lady Chatterley's lover and the Lord Chamberlain and the theatres and so on, how everyone hated that. But then if you give that up, and I agree, that's perhaps where we want to go, you have the responsibility to see that actions have consequences, to think through. You can't just assert your freedoms without considering the freedoms of others that might be offended.
A work of art does not affect freedom. Showing a work of art does not affect freedom. It provokes, it can make you think, it can actually be boring, it can be trite. The point is that the responsibility of an artist is to create a great artwork.
Yes.
The responsibility of audiences is to go to that if they want to see it and to then decide whether they think it's any good
so
or not.
would you go to something, say a similar human zoo, and I hate that phrase so much, and I think that's part of the issues, this phrase of a human zoo, of people in striped clothes queuing up outside gas chambers with other people as hostages?
I do not think
Would that be
I do
similar?
not think that the Holocaust or the treatment of the Jews in the Holocaust should not be subject of works of art. I do not think that there is any topic that should be so to be.
Yeah. You think it should be?
I
It can
have
be.
seen some great
Yeah.
works of art that have dealt with
I think the problem for this
the Holocaust.
I think
The idea that I'm not allowed to
discussion-
talk about it because I'm not Jewish or see it or discuss it.
No, no one said that.
It's about whether taboos can be adequately tackled and represented by works of art.
That's a good point. And I think that the issue is for us, as Africans here in the United Kingdom, racism and the issues that are raised by our Exhibit B are not some sort of dim and distant relic of our past. They are part of our present. Our ancestors are part of our present, who are represented metaphorically in this exhibition. And I think that the other point for us is that black people, we don't live in this society where all these freedoms apply to us and other people equally. We
Don't
live.
you?
Well, you know.
Stella?
I'd like to hear him finish the point, and then I...
Yeah,
no,
we don't live in such a society. We face discrimination. We face discrimination in the arts world. That's clear by the time we met the Barbican with its 99% whiteboard, and then the City of London Corporation who funds it with its 99% whiteboard, and then virtually no staff except black security. These are our living everyday realities. And to see that in somehow white artists and black artists are all equal under God's sun, that's where we should be. But in Britain, and in London in particular, that is not where we are.
And because we're not, that's what makes the art racist.
I disagree.
Well, fine,
Brett's intentions are very clear. It's exposing racism and I guess the constructs and the systems that were put in place that Europe has been built on. That's what is exposed, and he very clearly draws the line between that and what's happening today.
Okay,
So
all right.
it is essentially saying the same thing. And by trying to censor his voice, you've also censored 14 black artists who chose to be part of that.
All right,
We do
so
the point of
censoring debate and
censorship,
censoring the
because
book.
the play has been shown around the country. It's not been censored. It's been
Not
stopped
around
in
the
London.
country.
It's been stopped in London, but it's stopped in
stopped
Edinburgh.
it in London.
I want to
and
find
God
out...
willing, we'll stop it in New
that-
York and Paris and Moscow.
There is an arts event going on down in Cornwall, in Falmouth, so we're going to hear what people have to say there and join Rebecca. Rebecca.
Yes, thank you, Sian. Art has been taking centre stage here in Falmouth all this week with the Splash Arts Festival. Some of the artists have joined us on the beach this morning, as too has Dr. Larry Lynch from University College, Falmouth. So should art be censored?
I think not. I think that the arts, in all their variety, prevent societies and individuals within societies the principal means through which they can reflect upon, discuss and critique that which feels important, that which is difficult, and that which challenges and confuses. And I think...
But can't you do that without being offensive?
Well, I think offence is an entirely subjective matter, and I think if we were to quash or silence any art that any individual finds offensive, then the spectrum of the arts would be a very different matter, and one only has to visit a country where that does happen to cause us to think very deeply about the country we would like to live in when it comes to the arts.
OK, at this point, let me bring in Amelia Wolf. You're one of the artists who's been taking part in Splash. Should your work be censored?
No, not at all. I think it should challenge all audiences. Working within children's literature, I believe that there are different ways of talking about such subjects, in particular using metaphorical language, and you just have to look at our old nursery rhymes to see that you can talk about things in society at the same time creating something enjoyable and have multiple meanings in one sitting.
So the element really is that the artist needs to take responsibility for self-censorship almost?
Yeah, to some extent, yeah.
OK, lovely. Thank you both for joining us this morning. Those are the views from the Arts Festival here in Falmouth. It's back to you in the studio.
Thank you, and there were a lot of nods around here as well. Thanks, Rebecca. Just a few messages coming in from you at home. Rob, art like this does what history books can't. Being in a room with a man shackled and muzzled forces a sense of empathy rather than sympathy. Mark, I've listened to the artists and the models speak about this. Intelligent, eloquent people with an interesting perspective on how to convey their message. And Taryn, most of the black Londoners protesting are themselves descendants of slaves and don't need lessons in empathy. They are forced to confront the horrors of slavery on a personal level.
That's right.
Which is something I know, Lee, that you would endorse. Thank you all for joining us for that. You can see more about Exhibit B, the exhibition on BBC Arts online, bbc.co.uk/arts. Now, you've been voting on our question this morning. Do we have a moral duty to bomb Islamic State extremists? The vote is closing now. Do not text as your vote will